In 1993, there's drama at the Walt Disney Company. The head of the animation studio, Jeffrey Katzenberg, had been lobbying then CEO Michael Eisner for the chance to become the company's next president. After all, it was he who turned around the failing animation studio and kick-started the Disney Renaissance. I mean, sure, he had the help of some talented directors, but let's not worry about them. They're just film people. I am Katzenberg, and this new golden age of Disney was solely on his shoulders, for he is the prophet. What I'm trying to get at is Katzenberg had quite the ego under his belt. However, in the man's plots for domination, there was one person who stood in his way, and it was the then president, Frank Wells. So whenever Katzenberg asked Eisner, Eisner was like, no, but you could get the job if it's ever vacant. Enter 1994! Wells suddenly winds up passing from a helicopter crash after getting done with some heli-skiing, leaving the presidential spot vacant. For any normal person, this would wind up being a tragedy. But not for Katzenberg. He's a businessman. Katzenberg finally uses this chance to ask Eisner if he could become the Disney president. And Eisner says no. Tensions over the year continue to rise at Disney. Katzenberg continues to ask for the position from Eisner, and Eisner continues to just say no. The finale of the saga happens in October of the year, though, where Eisner decides, yeah, I'm done with you, and just gets rid of Katzenberg. So, Katzenberg's officially fired from the Walt Disney Company. Woohoo! While this may seem like an upsetting change at the tides, it wasn't all bad news because of one corporate word: severance. Jeffrey Katzenberg got a severance package valued at $250 million. And what do petty rich people do when they get a lot of money? They make petty movies. After getting removed from Disney, Katzenberg would go on to find new allies. He teams up with David Geffen, a powerhouse from the world of music, and Steven Spielberg, who I guess tried to resurrect the dinosaurs once? I don't really know what he does. The three went on to form the new company, DreamWorks SKG, and Katzenberg was placed right back in charge of feature animation. Nothing was gained from this, Katzenberg. Now, all is going normally as DreamWorks' animation group was working on their first film, Ants, yes. But as this is going through, a new idea comes to mind. Back in 1999, Steven Spielberg bought the film rights to a picture book named Shrek, authored by William Steig. He wanted to make it into a Bill Murray-led traditionally animated film, but things just didn't work out. This is until years later when the producer John H. Williams busts down the DreamWorks door with the book Shrek and gives them the idea to make it into a feature CGI film. We call this the Shrekesis. Now, the development of Shrek is a really interesting story for another day, but we're not going to be really going into that today because we're talking more about the films and their impact on film itself. So yeah. So now we're just going to jump to 2001. Also, this is going to be your canonical spoiler warning for the video. Everything past this will be diving into the movies and everything's on the table. So if you want to watch the films, just go watch the Shrek franchise and you can follow along as this is like an after show to that. And enjoy! In 2001's Shrek stars a misanthropic ogre named Shrek, played by Mike Myers. He has to deal with the fact that a bunch of fairy tale creatures were just dropped onto his swamp, and wanting to get rid of them, he sets out on a journey, and along the way, he learns the meaning of true friendship and love. Shrek is good. Nothing really more or anything, it's just a solid film within its own right. While the animation is aged, it looks way better than most films from around the era, and it shows off DreamWorks' early quality. The jokes in the film are fine, nothing too special, but as a film, it just suffers from a trope called Seinfeld is unfunny. Seinfeld is unfunny defines the audience reaction of it being a good work, but everything that's been building after this film is kind of outclassing it in certain ways, and this film loses a bit of its, cutting edge. Shrek's a great film, it just has been outdone numerous times at this point. However, when we start to dissect the characters of the film, the character pieces within Shrek is one of the most fascinating things about the whole picture. Because when you look at it, Shrek as a character is an inherent contradiction. He hates humanity and everything around him and wants to be alone, but he's also lonely. You can see very clearly in the picture that the writers set up every other character in the piece as somewhat of a foil or a counterpiece to who he is. Fiona, like him, has been isolated her whole life. but she's been more optimistic about a happy ending coming, while Shrek is pessimistic to the whole thing. And we're going to talk about Donkey in a sec because he's my favorite character in the entire film, but let's talk about the villain next. This is about to be my first of my Shrek hot takes that's going to be filling through this Shrekrospective, but Lord Farquaad is a bad villain. He fails to represent a rising threat of the movie and just exists at his castle while Shrek does the task, which isn't a big problem, but I just don't feel his presence through the film. And even with the jokes that they tell with Lord Farquaad, there's only two kinds. He's short, and he's Michael Eisner. Luckily, at least two of the Shrek movies will have better antagonists than him, but honestly, I think the true star of the show here is Donkey, played by Eddie Murphy. He gives a life to the film by being an invaluable character who's fun to watch and also just a really good comic relief for the story too. He also just manages to be the biggest driving force in the plot of this movie when you think about it, because everything else falls apart without him, which is a pretty impressive feat, especially knowing where he's going in this movie series. I feel like I'm forgetting something that's truly an all-star. Oh yeah, the soundtrack! Shrek innovated the soundtrack world in so many ways by assembling a ton of great songs from the time and the past, and the soundtrack's truly incredible for it. You don't know many other franchises where you can hear a song and be like, oh, that's a Shrek song! But with the Shrek, the songs are so intrinsically tied to the movie's identity if you've been growing up with these films, that's genuinely really impressive. Overall, Shrek's a really fun film that becomes such a basis for animation's innovations in the next 2 decades. And I'd give it a 7 out of 10, which might seem low, but Shrek's good, it's solid. There's not too much that makes it great, but like, everything here is good and it works. And it's the first 7+ score that I've given it in my retrospectives because Ice Age is not good. Shrek was a groundbreaking film, not just for DreamWorks, but a lot of film as a whole gets shaped in its image. It also managed to be a trendsetter at the 2001 Oscars, winning the first Best Animated Feature and getting nominated for Best Adapted Screenplay, which the only other animated film to ever get nominated for that award is Toy Story 3. Meanwhile, it was the 4th best performing film at the box office in all of 2001. All the success cemented the celebrity voice cast as a primitive trope of the animation medium, and something that every film, even nowadays, is still doing. Shrek redefined marketability in films as we know it. And between Shrek and Monsters, Inc., CGI's taken over the animation field, and it's the definitive year that ends the traditionally animated domination that the 1900s had. Pixar had previously had some success in this field, with their films being the winners of a lot of these years, but Shrek definitely cemented it all into motion because it just showed that the 2D animation domination was completely over. Especially when it beat Disney's traditionally animated film of the year, Atlantis, by 3 times its revenue. Meanwhile, after subsequent films Spirit and Sinbad don't perform well, DreamWorks gave up on 2D animation altogether and hasn't released a 2D animated film into theaters since. But most importantly, Shrek led to Shrek 2. In Shrek 2, Shrek and Fiona go to far, far away to meet Fiona's parents. However, plans go astray from the goal as the population of Far, Far Away is disappointed with Shrek being an ogre, and Shrek's thrust into an existential crisis on whether he is worth it or not. Along the way are newcomers such as the antagonist, Fairy Godmother, played by Jennifer Saunders, and Antonio Banderas as Puss in Boots. Fun fact, did you know that Antonio also voices Puss in 3 of the foreign dubs? That's a random fact, but how many actors do you know that voice their characters in foreign dubs? But how is Shrek 2? Shrek 2 is such an improvement over the first one in literally every single way. The animation is better, most of the characters feel better, the pacing's way better, the soundtrack slaps even harder, but there's 2 things that I need to preface it as being official standouts for the movie. I think the Fairy Godmother is the most memorable Shrek villain. She's a threat in every scene she's in and manages to be a delightful yet menacing watch that makes the film all the better. Her jokes work, and the final song, Holding Out for a Hero, in the soundtrack is one of the best climaxes in all of film. But to elaborate on that climax, a lot of people say that it's the best, and I'm going to mention it again though because it's just something that you can say rarely when you're watching movies. Every character feels like they get their moment, and even characters who for the rest of the film felt like furniture just get something to do, which is all you need for a comedy climax, just having everything come back to full motion, and there's just so much to love about it. Now, aside from a few jokes that have aged really poorly, most notably the Knights joke has aged really poorly. Most of the comedy's spot on. Everything with Puss is especially fun too, and most of the moments land. There's just so much fun that they're having on every character's front in this film that it's just great to see. Now, in comparison to the first film, I like the first film, but I don't think the first film's nearly having as much fun with the story and premise as it really could be doing. Shrek 2 feels like it's trying to have more fun, and it's more comfortable in its own skins, and not just a hit piece on Disney and Michael Eisner. Everything's a little more mellowed out, and just everyone's having more fun with the writing, and that's really helpful for the film. Now, there's still stuff not to like in this movie. I feel like Donkey and Fiona get shafted from the plot, with neither getting the narrative significance that you want them to get after the first film. But I'm not going to go into super depth on this throughout this essay, because that's a topic that's more in depth. So I'd recommend you check out Red Von Buzzkirk's essay, Why Donkey Matters. It goes into the subject more than this video is going to, and it's really fun. You should check it out. I'm definitely putting it in the description of this video so you can make sure you watch it. You know, because overall, I would give Shrek 2 a 9 out of 10, which is a great sign for the franchise to come. Right? Hey guys, so editing Phineas here. So I've been editing with clips, but also clips are very vital in the YouTube landscape, so I'm going to be switching over to having some Slime Rancher gameplay, and there is nothing you as a human being can do about that. So enjoy, it'll be a little chaotic, and enjoy. So 2004's Shrek 2 ended up being an even bigger success than the first one. It was the single highest grossing film of all of 2004, beating Harry Potter for its first and only time, and was also nominated for Best Animated Feature as well as Best Original Song. With the success of Shrek 2 though, we would see the animation landscape start to mold even further into this series' image. This comes with a rise of fractured fairy tale films, which take the existing fairy tales and alter them like how they perceive that Shrek did, and its various results depending on the film. For instance, when Disney tackled the formula, they would do it in the film Chicken Little, which is a worthless movie of Disney trying to capitalize on what they perceived the DreamWorks formula to be in 2005, because Disney was really bleeding money at this point. The Eisner reign was almost nearing its end, and yeah, but so Chicken Little's a really bad film critically. No one really likes it, and it's commonly regarded as the worst Disney film, justifiably. But it did financially well, so Disney stabilized a little bit more. Meanwhile, when we go and dive into the indie sphere, we get things like Hoodwinked, which is a film that looks really ugly, but if you look past how ugly it looks, it's got a lot of wit to its story and it's very charming. But then you get films like Vanguard Animation's Happily Never After, which should never have existed. It's a direct-to-DVD style film that somehow got to theaters. The animation is worse. I think it's worse than Hoodwinked's. And the writing is very abysmal, and don't watch Happily Never After ever, please, for your own good, and because I care about you, I'm telling you not to watch it, so yes. On another note, Eddie Murphy plays Donkey on a primetime cartoon called Father of the Pride that DreamWorks was doing, that starred John Goodman, and it felt like a desperate attempt to boost the show's ratings. Donkey says Shrek 3 is coming in 2006. He lied to us. The show looks awful, but it's a thing that DreamWorks did. And I watched the episode on just for this retrospective, so I know it's bad. In the DreamWorks boardroom. So, in our first film, Shrek has found love and friendship. Then, Shrek solved his insecurities. Now, Shrek must have kids. Cue the fictional applause of everyone in that DreamWorks boardroom. Shrek the Third is, in matter of fact, the third Shrek movie. Now, this one's got a bit of a plot, like convoluted and stuff, with not much going on, but enough that I'm gonna go into what I've done in previous explanations of movies and just ramble it through to you guys. So here we go. Are you ready? Shrek the Third features King Harold dying and leaving Shrek to be king. However, Shrek really don't want to be king, so he, Donkey, and Puss get on a boat to go to fictional England and get the only other heir in all the world, Arthur, played by Justin Timberlake, to be king. But Arthur also don't want to be the king, so now Shrek's gotta convince him that he, Arthur, is the only choice for the throne. So Arthur's like, okay, and then the four just venture back to far, far away, only to crash onto the island of the Wizard Merlin midway into their journey, where they all gotta work out their daddy issues, which they do, and then they make it back to far, far away. Meanwhile, in Far Far Away, Prince Charming, the fairy godmother's son from the second movie, has decided he's upset. So upset that he will lead the villains in a rebellion. So the villains are like, okay, and they smash and pillage Far Far Away. Meanwhile, Fiona is pregnant and Shrek doesn't want kids. Guess he should have known that abstinence is key! All collides with Charming's villains capturing Fiona, but then the queen busts them out with her head, and then Shrek and Arthur fight because Shrek lied and could have been king himself. Charming then captures Shrek and proceeds to execute with a long-lost execution method of musical theater. However, a body swap from Merlin's magic, Puss and Donkey, team up with Fiona, the queen, the princesses, and the fairy tale creatures to save Shrek. They get inside the theater and nearly win, and then Charming's like, no, me, and rallies the villains, only for Arthur to be like, villains, you can love! And that works on them! So the villains turn against Charming, but Dragon knocks the tower down on him, so Charming is dead. Arthur is king, Shrek has babies, the end. I say this out of love, but I say that Shrek the Third is an utter butchering of any soul the Shrek franchise had. For starters, the colors are so ugly and I don't even know why. Like, on the surface, it should look fine. You've nailed it for the past two films. And it's got a higher budget than the first and second film, but this looks like it spent some of its time in the dumpster. I know color is such a mild thing in film, but at least like Shrek 2 had an energy in both its color and animation, and this film's got none of that. But most importantly for what I like to see in films, the story sucks too. The plot issues that the characters are having are aggressively bland, and hardly any of the characters actually impact the plot. Anyone who's not Charming, Arthur, Shrek, and maybe Merlin are just dressing on a bad salad, and the jokes feel like they've been sapped of any of the energy that the first two movies brought to the table. Most of the dramatic beats in this movie fail too, like the death of King Harold feels out of nowhere, and also Prince Charming just beats Farquaad as being the worst Shrek villain. He's just a spoiled rich kid without a family structure who lashes out because he didn't get to become the king. Also, this movie tries to give him a girlfriend with Rapunzel, and Rapunzel betrays the princesses at some point to help him out, but this betrayal is really stupid because it comes at no cost. No one cares about Rapunzel in the Shrek movies. I'm so sorry, DreamWorks. And also, gross heteronormativity. Also, like, Charming dies so anticlimactically. He gets crushed by a tower at the musical he made to set up to kill Shrek because his plan makes no sense. And you know what? Farquaad's death was better than this. The climax, gosh, it drags so hard, especially after 2 having, like, the best climax in all of cinema. Not exactly, but it's up there. Look, I could go further on dragging this movie into its muddy, muddy grave, but it's not worth it to me. Other essays have gone far more into detail on why this movie sucks, and you should probably watch those. And Shrek the Third is an ugly, ugly 3 out of 10. But the franchise was still going on, and we'd be seeing it for the next few years. So, before I can explain Shrek The Halls, we're needing to go into some more background, because Shrek The Halls starts another tradition for these major animated franchises. Shrek The Halls marks the birth of the made-for-TV holiday special. Usually these things get made when a franchise does a new film either in the pipeline or after a release is about to come to streaming. And it usually stars the characters of said franchise where either one of them or none of them know what Christmas/holiday or something is, and then they discover it together. This has been a staple of these franchises on TV for a while, but Shrek The Halls marks a major shift where motion pictures are starting to make the jump to it. DreamWorks would get to this one first, but Blue Sky and Pixar would both continue on this trend with the Ice Age specials that they made and the Toy Story specials. Now, as for Shrek The Halls, the special itself, it's not good. Shrek is told what Christmas is by Donkey, Shrek makes Christmas for his family, Shrek doesn't like breaking and entering into his house, so he kicks everyone out but his family out, and Fiona calls him out on it. Shrek then finds the true love and spirit of Christmas, happily ever after. That's it. This one also deals with a lot of the animation problems that the third suffers from, such as the coloring feeling off, and the characters just not being very expressive, and it just feels very unnecessary. Even though I grew up with it as a kid, I don't know how I wound up really wanting to watch it every single year, because other Christmas specials cover the whole premise way better. And the notable thing with how this shows where this franchise is going is how kid-centric it is. Because I think when Shrek started, it was a lot more on a universal basis, but they really started to move it towards the family direction around this time, and no one's gonna really enjoy this thing but the kids or the parents who are like, hey, celebrity voice actor. But yeah, I give it 4 out of 10. And let's move on, shall we? Okay, so here's something ironic. Shrek, the movie meant to make fun of all things Disney, got a musical. Why? But honestly, the even funnier thing in this story, the musical started development like in 2002. That's so far back in this franchise's lifespan. And the musical's kind of a mess that they took 6 years to make. Now, not that this music's objectively bad, because honestly, some of the songs, when you don't think about them too well, slap decently enough. A lot of the beats are rather standard, but they work for what they do. A standout song is Freak Flag, and I think You've Got You Beat also works in my mind. But the music is just aggressively okay. The songs aren't catchy, and you're not going to leave a theater singing them for more than one day, and when you get the lyrics in the story, you tap into a completely different beast altogether. I think, like, the biggest problem with Shrek the Musical is how mean-spirited it is. Now, Shrek's a very cynical and petty movie, but within the musical format, you're not expecting something that's so biting or cynical as is. Not to mention that for a show where one of the biggest messages is being yourself and accepting you for you, a lot of the jokes feel very not body positive, and it makes for an unfortunate taste for the show to have in it. Plus, like, theater is a medium that is one of the more accepting ones, and this just gives kind of a sour taste amongst its kindred musicals. On a lighter side, I think the costume and set design in this movie is cool, because whenever Broadway kind of moves cartoonish, you know it's usually going to be an interesting ride with what they come up with. In particular, like, the SpongeBob musical is one of the best musicals on all of Broadway, and I will stand by that. It's a really great show, and they went all cartoony, and it looks beautiful. I think another point that you can bring up with a musical is it shows exactly what this franchise has become. Once a critique of the Disney company and how Disney managed their properties, Shrek becomes exactly how Disney's processed a lot of their properties, minus things like direct-to-DVD sequels. But it's getting there. It's as commercial as Disney, and it's an unfortunate sight. Overall, the musical's meh. It's not going to be a standout, I think, for me, and probably for a lot of y'all. So, 5 out of 10, let's move along. Okay, so it's been a bit since we talked about the movies. How did Shrek the Third go over? The answer is not well. Critically, the movie plummeted in general regards, losing the franchise nearly a lot of its acclaim from the past, while financially it still did amazing, but less amazing than Shrek 2's biggest movie of the year title. Even when you look at the film culturally, no one's quoting or making memes of Shrek the Third. It's just, for those who think about it, it's like, oh, Shrek the Third was bad, and then they move on. However, its negative response even internally affected the studio, because they were initially going to be making 5 Shrek films, but Shrek the Third's poor reception caused DreamWorks to cancel plans for the 5th Shrek film, and just instead end it at the 4th one, now known as Shrek Forever After. Now, before you hear my main take of the argument, I want you to know that this is going to be the biggest hot take that I've put out to my YouTube channel up until this point, and probably for some time to come. Are you guys ready? 3, 2, 1. Shrek Forever After is my favorite Shrek movie. Now, favorites don't inherently define what's being the best one. I think Shrek 2 has a really solid argument for being someone's favorite of these movies, and whatever opinions people have on movies, they're inherently valid. No one explains your taste like you, so love whatever you love. And honestly, my take might be because Shrek 2 is so ingrained into the pop culture pantheon and mildly just worn into everyone's conscience, while this film, Shrek Forever After's, not really mentioned in mainstream culture anymore, aside from people who fell in love with it on the internet. But before I back my hottest take of the century, let's get into this film, shall we? Shrek is disillusioned with his life, as every single day he exists just happens to feel the same. He loves everything, but the same old gets to him. This mental torment gets to him when he finally snaps at his kid's birthday party and tells Fiona that he'd rather have never met her at all. Just gonna say for a second that this scene's often regarded as one of the worst, if not the worst scene in all the Shrek movies, but I think with everything that's set up in the movie, it's brilliant, and I'm gonna talk about it in a bit. Shrek makes a deal with the devil to get a break from the routine with the film's villain Rumpelstiltskin. He proceeds to get It's a Wonderful Life to a world where he can live free, but his survival is on a clock to save himself and the world as it's known because of what Rumple took in return. The day he was born. So, Shrek Forever After is not nearly as much a parody of fairy tales like the first 3 films. I think it's a deconstruction on what Shrek as a franchise and the animated blockbuster is. While the other films challenge themes of do people deserve happy endings and who gets to keep their happy endings, this film deals with what if your happy ending wasn't what you wanted. I think part of why the first act of this film feels so real is because the feeling of having a happy life that's still an autopilot, or that you're the passenger in your own body, is such a genuine feeling that people struggle with. I struggle with it all the time. Many people think that Shrek snapping on his family in the first act is unjustified, and though while it's cruel, I think knowing what he's going through with everything, it makes complete sense for his character. So, the other thing that I love about Shrek Forever After is re-railing everything that had gone off the rails as the franchise's run continued. Things like the animation, soundtrack, and jokes that made it as signature features of the franchise feel restored, and that's when we get to the characters. Characters like Donkey, Puss, and especially Fiona feel restored to their purpose to the plot. Because in previous films, they've been irrelevant, usually after their released film. And it's nice to feel like they're all back in action for this. This is the ultimate Shrek movie in that regard. Meanwhile, side characters who have been tossed in throughout the series that have started to get more annoying are still here, but it's for smaller bits only, and they're not really existing too much in the film for prominence. And that's where we get to another big thing. Shrek Forever After dives headfirst into drama and pulls it off to a masterful effect. The various scenes of Shrek and Fiona rekindling their love together is also a really great watch, particularly the moment where they're sparring together in the alternate universe. It winds up being a strong signature scene of the film, and it's one of many, many good scenes in this. This is also going to be a hot take, but this film nails their romance better than any other entry in the Shrek franchise, including the first film. Other scenes just that stand out are the ogre dance scene, and the climax of this film is easily the second best climax in all of the Shrek franchise. But the true scene stealer of the characters in this movie for me is the newcomer villain Rumpelstiltskin, who I'm proceeding to call Rumple for the rest of this video. I think Rumple combines the elements of the 3 past Shrek antagonists in the best possible way. Like Farquaad, he's an egocentric, short, goal-oriented gremlin who only sees the world for himself. Like Fairy Godmother, he's a master planner who plays a game filled with gambits to take Shrek down. And like Charming, he is a showman who plans for world domination. There's one thing that separates Rumple from most of the other Shrek villains. Rumple wins. Throughout the entire movie, he nearly has Shrek and Shrekmate. I'm not apologizing for that pun. How dare you think I should? By the end of the first act, Rumple has exactly what he wants, and from that point onwards in the movie, Shrek's racing against the clock. I mean, Shrek also spends Shrek 2 playing against the clock, but the difference here this time is stakes. If Shrek loses in this movie, he's done. It's all over now. I just love the grand stakes of this movie. People say that it's like a fan fiction, and it is, but it is in the best possible way, and I love it for that. Also, another thing that I love with the character is Walt Doran's voice acting for Rumple is really amazing, and it brings him to life so well. All of these factors make Rumple the perfect last villain to Shrek's story. Not that he's the best villain, but I think that he's so iconic for how he brings everything together. Now, speaking of the Shrek story, Shrek Forever After is loaded with fan service for fans of the franchise. Scenes, songs, and jokes call back to many scenes of the first 2 films with how they feel, and also for the most part leaves Shrek the Third to die, which is also a massive plus. Now, I know this isn't the popular opinion, but I think Forever After is one of the best finales to a film series in all of cinema. Every beat goes into place, and things just call back to the past in ways that aren't forced at all, which is especially nice when you look at it in retrospect from the modern landscape of forcing connections to past movies and everything. But all the new additions to this film also just work into the picture. In my rating scale, Shrek Forever After earns itself a 10 out of 10, and its place as one of the most underrated films to be released. Now, even though that was the final chapter of the Shrek films, I have got 2 more pieces of media that I want to go over before we can get to the end of the video, so get ready to be scared Shrekless. So after releasing Shrek Forever After, DreamWorks decided to give the franchise one more holiday special to flesh out its catalog. This becomes the Halloween special known as Scared Shrekless, and this one's meh. I think it's a cool experience seeing more of these characters, and Halloween actually makes sense for a holiday to have in the Shrekverse. But at the same time, the movie's rather dull. Movie parodies in Shrek is just an concept, and well, the concept that the plot goes with of the characters having a competition to see who can get the scare the least is kind of nice. The 3 stories format is always something that works for them. I don't think this is anything that the Shrek fans are gonna seek out for the holidays. I know this segment's brief, but Scared Shrekless is such a brief glimpse into Shrek history that it's not really worth talking about too much, aside from how it's 5 out of 10. The one thing though that's of note here is this is the canonical last time that we ever see most of the Shrek cast on film or TV, except for like one character, and his name is Puss in Boots. I'm almost to the end! Puss in Boots is, up until this point, the final theatrical film in the Shrek universe, and it came out just 1 year after Forever After in 2011. I say that for now because this very year, in 2022, there's a sequel on its way, and it looks great! Now, I'm including Puss in Boots into this retrospective because it's Shrek content, technically, but the movie feels completely separated from the mainline Shrek films as if it was in its own universe. And as a film, Puss in Boots is cute. Now, I don't usually like to use this word to describe media, because it feels so weird, but honestly, it's a perfect way to describe this film. The animation is really great, but aside from that, nothing really stands out too much in the film, but it's still a really fun time. The plot of the movie is Puss is on an adventure to get some magic beans. He meets up and does a heist with the newcomer of the movie, Kitty Softpaws, and his old best friend Humpty Dumpty as they contend with Jack and Jill. And thankfully, this movie, Jack and Jill, aren't played by Adam Sandler. As I mentioned earlier on, I think the strongest elements within the movie are its animation, which is so colorful and fun. The action sequences are pretty great, and it's not really a funny film, just fun to have in the background more so. And there's some nuance in the Puss-Humpty friendship, and if you've seen a lot of the movies, nothing just really stands out. It's a standard rogue, anti-hero, origin story stuff. But I recommend you check it out if you want to watch something that feels good, and it's a good thing to have in the background. It's just not much to talk about here. I'd rate this film about a 6 out of 10. That is all the Shrek movies and TV shows. Let's get on to the conclusions of this essay now, shall we? Shrek Forever After and Puss in Boots would be the last films in the Shrek universe. And after this point, the franchise has remained rather dormant, with a few exceptions. In 2015, there was a TV show called The Adventures of Puss in Boots, and yeah, neither of these films really made the cultural box office splash that DreamWorks was really hoping for, and I guess this is what we get to see with the franchise going dormant after that point. Things have just all gone downhill after Shrek the Third for the franchise. However, even in this dry age where like nothing's coming out, the first 2 Shrek films I think remain in the public conscience as tentpole films of the 2000s. Shrek is at this point the 17th highest grossing feature film franchise of all time, and for a film franchise where all of the entries were released in 2000s or early 2010s, and it still holds the record like that, that's pretty impressive. As for animated franchises, it's only beaten out at the box office by the Despicable Me series, and yeah, understandable. Another thing to note about the Shrek movies is they've been kept around for a while, I think because of the meme culture the internet keeps loving with it. People still talk about the films, at least the first 2 mainly, and I think we're gonna see a revival in the coming decade. Universal has wanted a Shrek 5 for a while, and with the 20-year cycle of nostalgia, we're definitely gonna start to see an audience for it. The future of Shrek looks bright, as long as you're not looking up DreamWorks TV Shrek on YouTube. And then you'll probably want to gag. There will most likely never be an animated film franchise that redefines the world like Shrek did, because its release at the start of the millennium has indicated one of the biggest turning points in all of film culture, animated or not. It signaled the turning tides in theatrical animation and marketing for films in almost every area with its formula, and would pave the way for the next 2 decades, as well as leaving a legacy on almost everywhere that it touched. For a franchise like Shrek to sort of remain dormant for 11 years is genuinely shocking, especially with how studios tend to milk their franchises for as much dough as they can get out of them. But even more than that, the films have defined animation and culture for anyone who watched their releases in theaters or on cable or anything where it is. These films remain culturally relevant to this day, and it's really impressive. Shrek's satire was also effective at shaping the world as it is. Disney spent the entire 2000s decade on the edge, and this film is a major factor of why. We see Disney as the dominant force currently in the 2020s animation and media landscape, but back when Shrek was coming out, Disney was not nearly as powerful as they were, and they were playing second fiddle. I think that all of this coming together makes it a sadder case about how ogre-saturated Shrek as a franchise eventually became. We see counterculture satire becoming the new culture in ways, and animation has forever shaped itself in Shrek's image, and that's something that's important. Now, to my dearest viewers who watched 30 minutes of a Shrek Retrospective, or a Shrekrospective if you're cool with the kids, I think I need to rank the franchise now, because I like doing that. This is a retrospective. Here we go. Woohoo! Number 8, Shrek the Third. Number 7, Shrek The Halls. Number 6, Scared Shrekless. Number 5, Shrek The Musical. Number 4, Puss in Boots. Number 3, Shrek. Number 2, Shrek 2. Number 1, Shrek Forever After. Oh my gosh, I'm saying this out loud in a college dorm where other dorms can probably hear me. Honestly though, guys, if you told me that any of these top 3 were your favorite, I wouldn't blame you. You get your own taste in media, and I think that's so valid. And on that note, this video essay is officially getting its happily ever after. Thank you to everyone who watched this video. I spent a week working on this, and I loved making it. So if you want to see more videos like this, talking about weird franchises, I've got one on Ice Age, but also you can like this video, comment, and subscribe, because that's spicy, and the algorithm likes things that are spicy. Be spicy. Be Shreksy. I'm going insane. I don't know why I did this all. It's amazing. It's life. All's life. Woohoo! Time is up. Game's over. Video essay's ending. I'm proud of you. Enjoy! I haven't really gotten a chance to say this out loud, but I have a Discord server. You can join that in the description of any one of my videos, and you'd be all welcome to join because that's valid, and I want to have you as part of that community. It's cozy. So I'm gonna let the bloopers of me going insane play even more after this, because everything you just heard was not a blooper. I got separate bloopers because I'm spicy. And enjoy your day. Throughout the following year, tensions are rising at Disney. Katzenberg continues to be petty and wants this position, and Eisner's just not granting what he's promised. And yeah, this is what happens when money happens, I guess. This all culminates... Wait, what? Is that how I say that word? I'm sorry, microphone. You've dealt with a lot of abuse this day. 2001's Shrek stars a myth... Wait, what the words? He doesn't represent a rising threat in the forest for Shrek to deal with as much as a passive force, and he exists as his castle... Wait, what words? Meanwhile, it was a smash hit at the box office...